All right, everyone. For those of you who are participating in the workshops, I hope you just enjoyed our first collaboration matchup. For those of you who are joining us for the speaker series, welcome. My name is Alana Weisberg. I am your MC for the speaker series. I would like to call up Dr. Jeff Caird, a professor in the Department of Psychology, to introduce our first keynote speaker. Jeff?
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Wendy Rogers. Dr. Rogers is one of the leading researchers in human factors in the world. She's currently the Shahid and Ann Carlson Kahn Professor of Applied Health Science at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Of the many, many awards and honors that she has received, I'd like to mention two. First, in 2018, the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society named Dr. Rogers Woman Mentor of the Year. Dr. Rogers' students absolutely rave about her support and mentorship. Second, Dr. Rogers and her co-authors received the Gerontological Society of America Richard Kalish Innovative Publication for the book Designing for Older Adults, Principles and Creative Human Approaches. Designing for Older Adults, which is in the third edition, is the guide for understanding human factors issues and creating solutions for older adults. It's a very accessible book for both academics and practitioners. Dr. Rogers will be speaking today about recent advances in the design of robots to support successful aging. Please welcome Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, Jeff. My pleasure to be here. Bear with me while I make sure everything works. All righty, do this. Okay, I'm hoping that everybody can see my slides and assuming somebody will let me know if you can't. It's my great pleasure to be here with people from all over the world this morning. I'm here, it's 9 a.m. here in Champaign, Illinois. And it's a beautiful day, beautiful fall day, and I'm delighted to be here. This slide is our lab template that we use for everything. And it fits really, really well with the exercise we just did, thinking about person-centered design, because everyone pictured along the bottom are family members of people in our lab. So somebody's grandparents, their aunts, my parents are over here on the left, my dad and my mom, on the far right of the screen rather. And so we like to think about them in every presentation that we give. I have a number of different roles at the University of Illinois, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them. So I'm the director of a program called CHART, which I'll describe in a moment. I'm the director of a new research facility that we've just opened up called the McKechnie Family Life Home. I'm also the director of my lab, which is the Human Factors and Aging Laboratory, as well as the director of the Health Technology Education Program. As we've already heard a bit about, and is probably really well known these days, populations are getting older. I like to start with this slide though, because it reminds me of how much is changing across the world. This slide comes from a WHO World Report on Aging and Health that came out in 2015. And this is showing the percentage of people who are over the age of 60. The gray is in that part of the world right now, it's less than 10%. The bright blue, it's between 10 and 30%. And the dark blue, it's 30% or more. This is 2015. Now look what's happening by 2050. Look at find your own respective country on there. And what you see is this dramatic increase in the percentage of individuals in the population who will be over the age of 60. And so what I like to tell my students is it doesn't matter what you're doing, what you're designing, a large group of your users are going to be over the age of 60, and you need to understand what their needs are. I moved to the University of Illinois in 2017 to start a new program, and the program is called CHART, which stands for Collaborations in Health, Aging, Research, and Technology. And our goal is to harness technology to support successful aging through multifaceted activities. So through research, through development, through education and taking what we've learned and providing guidance for policy decision making. And really important to me personally is translating these efforts to positively affect the lives of older adults. We work at 4 intersecting domains, which fits really perfectly with the goals of this conference: healthcare, technology, aging, and then my specific expertise and interest, as Jeff mentioned, is in the area of human factors. And so the Human Factors and Aging Lab is bringing together this field of human factors, which you may be familiar with. It's the study of people, but how those people interact with products, with environments, with equipment, and thinking about their needs as well as their capabilities as we're designing systems or devices, but also when we're designing training and instructional materials, as well as environments as a whole. So the short term for human factors is designing for human use. In my lab in particular, we're focusing on older adults. What are their abilities, limitations, needs, and preferences? And we really like to emphasize that we don't design for older adults, we design with them. They are actively engaged in every study that we're doing to ensure that we're developing usable and useful products and systems, effective training and instructional materials, and getting to that point of deploying and introducing these technologies into their everyday environments. And so when we think about support for successful aging, we think about this very broadly, enabling people to function effectively and independently and maintain their personal autonomy, retain and enhance their abilities, allow them to manage their health, both in terms of managing chronic conditions, but also enhancing their wellness. Very important, as we know, even more so recently, remaining socially engaged and participating in their community. So the general mantra is trying to maximize the person's quality of life. And when we think of successful aging and quality of life, what does that entail? There are a number of different activities that people need to be able to engage in. One category is called activities of daily living: bathing, eating, drinking, mobility, these fundamental activities. Second is a category called instrumental activities of daily living. And these are a little bit more maybe cognitively intensive, maybe a little bit more complex, including things like preparing meals, paying your bills, managing your medications, and maintaining your home. When I first started working in the field of aging, this was the primary focus. How do we help older adults do these things, basic activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living? And we conducted a study and discovered, perhaps not surprisingly, that older adults want to do a whole host of other things. So we labeled this other set of activities enhanced activities of daily living. Social communication, hobbies, new learning, work, volunteer, all the things that make life rich and wonderful. Yes, I have to be able to do ADLs and IADLs, but I want to also be able to do EADLs. And so that's the backdrop of what we try to do in my lab. And then specifically what I'll talk about today is the design of robots to support all of these different activities. So how do we design robots to support successful aging? My colleague Tracy Mitzner and I were invited to do an article for an encyclopedia of computer science and technology, and we developed a framework that I'll walk you through just briefly, with the idea of emphasizing the complexity of this space. If we're going to successfully design robots, what do we need to think about? We need to think about the person. What are their characteristics? Demographic characteristics, age, sex, education, culture, as well as their abilities. What are they capable of doing? And the flip side of that, what are their limitations? But also things that we labeled psychographics, personality, emotion, attitudes. That's going to be critical. Specific experience, either with technology or with robots, as well as expectations. And then what is their personal situation? What are you designing for? Next, you need to think about the robot that you're designing. What does it look like? Does it have a personality? Does it show emotion and affect? And then importantly, of course, what are its capabilities and functionalities? Is it adaptable? Does it learn? Can it maneuver around an environment? Is it reliable and predictable? Does it work autonomously, or is somebody controlling it? So thinking about all of these different activities. And then what are the human and the robot trying to do? What are the tasks they're trying to carry out? So their general task details, like whether it's a high consequence of error, which is often the case in a healthcare context, or it's very critical, or it needs to be done quickly, or maybe it involves using some kind of medical device. So thinking about the speed and the accuracy requirements. But also, what are the requirements for the interaction? How close do the human and the robot need to be to each other? Are they coming into physical contact? How does the robot approach the human? Is there maybe going to be some possibility of the person being startled, for example? And then how is the interaction and the control accomplished? And then the last component, as important as all the rest, is the context. What is the context of the interaction? Is it in a home environment? What is the social environment? Are there other people around? What is the structural environment for the maneuverability of the robot? And then the context of the use, the interaction, safety, stress, all of those things. And so what we argued in this short paper, which I'm happy to share with anyone, is really when you set out to design a robot, you need to think about all of these different activities. So I'd like to really focus on today is what I'm calling a robot story. One of the fun parts of being in a field for a long time is you get to see the developments and the transitions, especially when we're working in technology fields. So I'm going to start by showing you a little bit about one of the first large robots that I started working with was called the PR2. And it's about 5'5" tall. It weighs 500 pounds. And it cost $400,000. So this was developed for research. It wasn't for you to, go to the store and purchase it. It was developed for research. But then here we are today, and I'm collaborating with a company on a robot called Stretch. It's a little bit shorter, weighs an order of magnitude less, only 51 pounds, and only cost approximately $18,000. And what's striking to me about this is you'll see some of the capabilities that Stretch has, we developed based on our experience working with the PR2. But in just 10 years, that's a huge transition in terms of cost and weight and capabilities and functionality. So I'm going to walk you through this little bit of the history here. My work with the PR2 was based on some collaborations I did with Charlie Camp at Georgia Tech. And this was a robot that was made by Willow Garage, and it was a mobile manipulation robot specifically designed for research and development. So they had a competition. We've developed these robots. We want people to work with them. And they gave away 11 of them. And Charlie and I won. And I was at Georgia Tech at the time, and it was delivered to us at Georgia Tech. One of the reasons we were told that we were selected is because we were specifically looking at the human-robot interaction. Charlie is a roboticist, I'm a human factors person, and we were looking at use by older adults. And I think the reviewers were very impressed by that intersection where we were doing our work. So we started with the PR2 looking at what are the tasks that would need support? And importantly, are older adults willing to have a robot provide support for these kinds of tasks? What are their attitudes, reactions, preferences, trust, concerns? And this was published in a paper that was one of the other things that was fun about these projects was having my students and Charlie's students get to work together. So very early work looking at attitudes, preferences, and potential for domestic robots. And then we also did a study where we had them interacting with the robots to evaluate whether their opinions changed after having had the opportunity to interact with the robot. This is one of my favorite papers because there are half roboticists and half psychologists on this article. So it's a great example of the interdisciplinary work. So we had, I'm going to show you a video in just a moment, but these were the different activities that the PR2 could do autonomously: deliver medication to the person, clear away clutter, and learn light switches. And so I'll show you. Let me pause for just a moment because I don't know if I shared the sound, but I don't think you need the sound. Okay, I'm just going to narrate through. So the PR2 is navigating autonomously. You see Kanksha Prakash in the back, who is our graduate student, and she's holding an emergency stop button. So in case anybody got nervous about having this big heavy robot in their space, she could turn it off. And so what the PR2 is doing is using a rangefinder and searching for someone in the room that's wearing a radio frequency identification tag. And you'll see that Mr. Bolette, he was serving as our model here, is wearing a tag, and that lets the robot know that's where the medicine should be delivered. And Mr. Bolette was really very fun participant, and he's having a whole conversation with the robot saying, okay, come on, I'm ready, bring it over here. And one of the things you'll notice, though, this is a fairly large, heavy robot coming in quite close proximity to the participants. And we were concerned that they might be intimidated by that. They were not. They really, even though this robot isn't designed to be cute or anything, they loved it. So the robot hands off the medicine to Mr. Bolette and then goes back into either, the bedroom to plug itself back in and recharge, or off into another area of the home to do something else. And so this was some of the early work we were doing. This is a research facility at Georgia Tech called the Aware Home that allowed us to test the robot in the context of the home environment. And so this work really got a lot of attention. So this is in 2010, and we were selected by the Atlanta Magazine as a groundbreaker for being a provocative alternative in senior healthcare. And as a result of that, being in Atlanta, we were close to CNN headquarters. Charlie and one of his graduate students brought the PR2 to CNN and were featured on this program. Somebody watching the program was a fellow named Henry Evans. So this is Henry and his wife, Jane. In 2002, Henry had a brainstem dissection, and he has limited use of his thumb. He can move his head, but he's mute with quadriplegia. And Jane is his wife and primary caregiver. Henry got in touch with us and said, how do I get one of those robots in my home? He said, I want to work with you. I see so much potential for changing our lives with this kind of a robot. And so that is exactly what happened. So the company Willow Garage allowed us to move one of these robots into Henry's home. And he worked with, this is a lot of students from Charlie's lab. He worked with the students to say, this is what I need the robot to do. And they developed the abilities for the robot to do these things. So this was an amazing opportunity to work with a truly incredible person, Henry, and his wife, Jane. And they really helped us to advance the development in robotics. But as I've been emphasizing, this robot was heavy and expensive and difficult to maneuver. And so Charlie decided that the best way to move these things forward was to start his own company. And so he partnered with Aaron Edsinger. They're both graduates of MIT. They were there at the same time. Their mentor designed the Roomba, which is one of the very early robots that is available. And they developed a company called Hello Robot. And they talk about robots with purpose. So they want robots to help people live better lives. And when they founded this company, Charlie wrote to me in March 2020, and he said, we're developing these robots. We have 10 available for research labs. Would you like one? And I, of course, said, of course I would like one. And coincidentally, during this time, I had moved to the University of Illinois. Charlie and I stayed in close contact, but I was at the University of Illinois, and we had just developed a new research facility at the University of Illinois. is called the Life Home, which stands for Living in Interactive Future Environments. And the vision is thinking about this world where we have technology to support our quality of life. And it was developed by the university with an assistance from a generous donation from Dr. Jim and Karen McKechnie. This is the layout of the home. So the orange space at the top is a home simulation area. And then we have cameras throughout. We have an observation and control center. And then we have all this peripheral development space, including the remote access lab. So we can be in here controlling a robot as it's in the home space and evaluating its effectiveness. So Stretch lives up here in one of the bedrooms. So Stretch is the name of the robot that Hello Robot developed. And it joined us last spring in the Life Home. And we've been doing a number of different studies exploring the potential of Stretch to provide support for home activities, delivery of items, much like the PR2 could do. Also controlling the home space, turning on light switches, opening doors, reaching to the back of the sink to get the sprayer, as I mentioned, opening the cabinets. So we started by exploring the capabilities of the robot using our task set that we had developed with the PR2. So let me show you the short video here. Now in this video, my colleague Harshal Mahajan is controlling the robot using a video game controller. We've had the Stretch robot at this point for just 1 week, and he's already able, we've taken it out of the box, and he's delivering to me the bottle of water. As you can see, we're on campus, still wearing masks, following COVID protocols, but nevertheless, still being able to do our research with the robot. So one of the challenges, though, is I am not a gamer. This is me with the game controller. I was told I don't even hold it correctly, right? I just don't know how to do it. I don't know how to control a robot using that kind of interface. So there's also an interface that you can use on the web that's much easier. I'm showing just a brief video. The camera on the right is showing the top-down cameras from the ceiling of the Life Home. Actually, that's the vision on the left. The vision on the right, the video on the right, is what I would see if I were remote controlling the robot. And so I can drive it, I can move the arms up and down, I can open it and close it. So somebody could be in their own home controlling the robot that's in my home. So I wouldn't have to control it myself. So there's a lot of different things we're exploring about how best to control the robot, maybe by the person in the home, maybe by somebody else who's helping them, depending on their capabilities. So our early work was exploring human factors evaluations of this robot. So we were doing usability research in the Life Home to understand facilitators and barriers, even from the very beginning of taking it out of the box and getting it going. We wrote a tech report about how to do that and how the company could improve their instructional support. If we do want to get this out into people's homes, you're not going to have an engineer there to help you set it up. How do you go about doing that? We've also been doing task analysis and exploring different types of what are called end effectors. So the robot has a gripper, but you can put other tools on the end of it to enable it to do a broader range of tasks. Comparing remote teleoperation versus eyes on, comparing control by a range of users. As I mentioned, I'm the person who is the complete novice that they try to test out some of these different controls with. And we recently received funding from the National Institutes of Health to explore this work much further. So what we've done so far is available in a couple of technical reports. We also presented it at the Human Factors and Ergonomic Society Health Symposium, and again, just a couple of weeks ago at the Human Factors meeting. We then had an opportunity to partner with an occupational therapy student who was looking for her capstone project. And she connected with Henry and Jane Evans, and we put together a team to explore the potential of the Stretch robot for Henry in his home. And we're collaborating with folks at the University of Washington, Cornell, the Hello Robot team, and then my team at the University of Illinois. And so here's Henry joining us at the Life Home on one of our telepresence robots as we're teaching him how to use Stretch. And V is joining us on Zoom. And so we're teaching them how to use Stretch from our Life Home facility, because what we were going to do was to put the Stretch robot into the Evanses' home. And so they did some learning of how to use it and control it from the Life Home. And then V literally moved into their home for a couple of weeks. We tested things out, made some adjustments, and then moved back again for a couple of weeks so we could really explore the potential of this kind of robot to support an older adult with rather severe disabilities, as well as his caregiver and care partner, I should say. So the Hello Robot Company was interested in the various use cases. Robots for Humanity, that's Henry Evans' group. How can I use this to make myself more independent? And how can I relieve Jane's caregiving needs? The University of Washington team was specifically looking at the graphical user interface to make it easier to control by a wider variety of users. And our team at the University of Illinois was really focused on the usability and the human factors aspects of everything. So the goal was to think about how might we give Henry autonomy and support Jane in caregiving. And we focused on several different categories of tasks. I mentioned activities of daily living, feeding and grooming were very important. Instrumental activities of daily living, which turned out in Henry's case to be the ability to use a printer. And I'll show you some examples, but he likes to be able to look up menus and share them to Jane. He would write poems and songs and then print them and send them to his wife. You know, it's just a wonderful love story, as you'll see the two of them together. But then also being able to play games with his family using the robot. So I'm going to show you a couple of videos. And here's Henry controlling, here's the Stretch robot, and he now has a spoon on the end of it, and he's learning how to feed himself. And he's controlling the robot. He's doing everything himself. Jane is just there in case he, you know, aspirates or puts a little bit too much food in his mouth, but she's just there supervising in a sense. He's doing it all by himself. He can also use it to wipe his face after. I'm just showing the same video again so you can see how he's doing it. A lot of this he's doing through eye gaze, controlling the interface through his eyes. Another thing is that Henry has full sensory, I can't think of the right word, but full sensation in his body. And so he sometimes will get an itch. And so V, the occupational therapy student, outfitted the Stretch robot with a tool that enabled Henry to just scratch his head. You know, just something so small is huge for him, because he didn't have to call Jane to come and say, I have an itch on the top of my head. He could just do it himself. Let's see. So as I mentioned, sending something to the printer and being able to print it out turned out to be something he really wanted to do. And what this video is showing is sometimes you have to adjust the environment to fit with the robot. So V outfitted the printer with a couple of gripper things that would make it easier for the Stretch robot to grab a hold of it. And after just a short time of learning, Henry was able to turn on the printer, send something to the printer, go get it. And now here he is going down the hall, controlling it all himself to deliver it to his wife. And then this was just something Henry decided to do. Both Henry and Jane love flowers, and they always have flowers in their home. And so he decided that wouldn't it be nice if he could pick up a flower with the Stretch robot and deliver it to his wife. We always joke with Jane that she was just totally taken by surprise. This was not staged at all. And he's just thrilled, to be able to do that. So these kinds of, quality of life things that you can see that he's able to do with this robot. And then the last thing I just want to demonstrate was using it to play a game. So again, the occupational therapy student created this. It's a paper towel holder and she's adding some different things. So, but Henry can use the robot to control choosing the card he wants to play. And so he's able to play a game with his family on his own using the stretch robot. And so this illustrates, this is what it's showing what he can see if you had it turned around. But he can use the stretch robot, pick his card, play his card. It was, as they said, a little bit slower than had somebody been helping him, but he was doing it on his own, which I think was a lot more fun. And so if we think about the impact of this, so this is a post that the intern made, that V. Wynn made about her experience in the home of the Evanses. And when she posted that, a very well-known photographer named Peter Adams said, can I come and document all of this? So he does a lot of photography of technology developments. And so he set up a whole photo shoot at their home and documented everything that they were doing together, which I'm excited to see the additional exposure that will give to this robot. A couple of quotes I want to share. Henry said, robotics in general have had a very large impact on my life, and stretch is an important link in the evolution of those robotics. Jane's comment, robots have influenced Henry's life greatly. They gave him a reason to live. Stretch is the closest to improving Henry's life and therefore mine. I see Stretch doing several things around the house to help Henry and me, and they have contributed to the advancement and the development of this robot. This is one I want to share because it also is interesting to see the care recipient's perception and the care partner's perception. So Henry, the foam card holder was quite ingenious and allows me to play my own hand, which is great. Using stretch was surprisingly easy, showing how adaptable stretch is. However, when able-bodied people are playing with you, it is much faster and easier for them to help and not inconvenient for them. So that's his perspective. Jane's perspective, we have to ask ourselves over and over, why robots when a caregiver can do it 10 times faster? I see what it does to my husband mentally when he can do things by himself and not depend on anyone. This is huge because it translates to one's mental state. Attitude is the key to improving and moving forward. So even if it takes a little bit longer for Henry to do it with the robot, he's having more fun. He's having the autonomy. It's improving his quality of life. So some of the next steps for this stretch collaboration, one of the things that's exciting is that there are these robots all over the world. Now I know $18,000 to $20,000 is still a lot of money, but when you think about the potential, it's relatively inexpensive. And so various universities have purchased the robots, companies are working with the robot. And so there's an entire community working with these robots, and everything is in open source. So if we design something here at Illinois, we program it, it's shared with everybody at all of the other sites. It's really going to advance robotics in this space. I mentioned we have funding from the National Institutes of Health, and here we're supporting specifically on older adults with mobility limitations. We're also hosting a pitch competition this year, and the winner will get time in the life home using the stretch robot to explore their ideas for using stretch to support people aging with long-term disabilities. And then I'm teaching a new course this year, which has been a lot of fun, focused on human-robot interaction in the context of community health. So I just want to briefly share a couple of other robot studies that we're doing in the life home, just to show you the scope of what we're interested in. One example is a project with my colleague Girish Krishnan in the Granger College of Engineering at Illinois, and Ryan Reish, who's at OSF Healthcare. And we're exploring what they call soft and dexterous service robots to support healthcare at home. And the idea is you might have a rigid robot arm with a soft extension coming out of it so that you can reach up onto a shelf and not knock everything down. You can hand something to a person, less likely of injury. And so this is funded by a pilot grant project. So we're just getting started, but what we're looking at is healthcare providers' ideas for using this kind of robot for telehealth. What do they think it could do for them? And then what are the technical requirements? We're also exploring older adults' attitudes about having something like this in their home. So what we're exploring right now, so here's an example of, you can be looking at a wound on a participant's leg. You can reach around a chair with the soft arm and look at something that's difficult to see on the back of his leg. You can look at medication bottles, and there's a camera on the tip of the robot where you can see close up what you're looking at. Healthcare providers have a lot of ideas of how this might be useful. We're exploring the idea of a mobile platform where if you've had surgery and you need rehab or you need follow-ups for the first couple of weeks, we deliver the robot to your home. And then especially for rural elders here in Illinois, it's difficult to send somebody to the home every day for a 10-minute wound check. This would be something that would be easy to do with this type of robot in the home. So we're exploring, it's an exploration of the potential of this kind of a robot from two sides, two stakeholder groups, the healthcare providers and the older adults. Another project we're working on is thinking about how to use a robot to provide wayfinding assistance for people who have visual impairments. And this is with my colleague, Katie Driggs Campbell, who's also in engineering here at Illinois, funded by the Illinois Campus Research Board. And so thinking about how can we support individuals who have visual impairments when they're navigating unfamiliar and unstructured indoor spaces. If they're in a familiar space, most people with the visual impairment have figured out an easy way to move about their own apartment or dorm room or a classroom even once it becomes familiar. But what about when it's unfamiliar and unstructured? And so right now we're doing a needs assessment with blind individuals over the age of 18, so younger adults and older adults. What are their preferences for wayfinding assistance? And then we're exploring autonomous navigation and object avoidance. We might end up using the stretch robot as the basic platform for this study. One big challenge here, though, is the communication. How should the robot communicate to the person about what direction to go, or if there's an obstacle in front of them? And so we're exploring different ways of communication. Should it be through sound? Should it be through haptics? Should it be through voice? So this again is an exploration study with a lot of potential, I think, to support people of all ages with visual challenges. Third, we're very interested in the role of socialness of a robot. So for all of these robots I've been describing, I haven't really talked about what they look like or their personality or how social they are. And so that's another project that I'm exploring with Travis Cadillac and Megan Bales in my lab. And this is one survey that we did where we showed people different videos of robots that varied in how social they were. And one thing that I think is very interesting, I'll just share one piece of data with you, is that the user perceived sociability, shown here on the x-axis, as their perception of sociability increases, the trust, which is shown on the y-axis, also increases. And so if you're thinking about robots that are going to provide assistance to people, trust is critical. And what these data illustrate is that trust is directly related to how social they perceive the robot to be. So this is something we'll be exploring further. So in sum, when we think about robot design for health and wellness, we absolutely need to take a systems approach. We need to be thinking about the human, the robot, the task, the context, all of those things. It's a complex space that we need to embrace when we're doing this kind of design. We also need to think about all of the stakeholders. So this is showing Henry and Jane, the occupational therapist on the team, a care partner who comes into the home, a professional caregiver who comes into the home, and then Blaine, who is one of the roboticists who's designing the technology. How do they all work together is something that we need to be doing. huge advancements in the last decade, as I showed you from the evolution of the PR2 to the stretch robot. But there's so much more that needs to be done to really be able to reach the potential. I'd like to acknowledge the funders of the research that we've been doing, a variety of different sources. I also just wanted to very briefly introduce 3 centers that my lab is affiliated with. We're always open to collaboration. So Jeff mentioned a book that we wrote. This was an output of the CREATE Center. We've been funded since 1999 by the National Institute on Aging. The focus of CREATE is on aging and technology very generally. What are some technologies that could help all of us as we grow older? A more recently founded center is called TechSage, that was funded in 2013 by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. And here the focus is on technology to support aging in place for people with long-term disabilities. And in our center, we're primarily focused on people with vision, hearing, and mobility disabilities. And the third center is called Enhance, also funded by NIDLR. And this is focused on enhancing neurocognitive health, abilities, networks, and community engagement. And the Enhance Center is focused on people who are aging with a cognitive impairment. So it might be mild cognitive impairment. They could be on the path to Alzheimer's or other dementia, or individuals who've had a stroke or traumatic brain injury and have some cognitive impairment as a result. So all of these centers are active, and we're very interested in collaborations. The last thing I want to mention, I didn't have a chance to talk too much about it, but I want to mention it to everybody. We started a new master's program last year that is a Master of Science in Health Technology, and it's a 1-year intensive professional degree. So people come in for 12 months, classes in the fall, classes in the spring, and then a capstone experience in the summer that is sponsored by an industry partner, a clinical partner, or a research faculty. And so I encourage you to, I know you might not have time to write down this website, but just email me if you have any questions or you have any students that you think might be interested in this program. It's a one-of-a-kind focused on human factors and health, that intersection of the two. So with that, I introduce you to my lab. We had the opportunity to go to the Life Home this week. We're still wearing masks, so we all took our masks off for just 5 seconds so we could take a picture together. But this is the Human Factors and Aging Laboratory team, without whom I couldn't do this work. My email address, wendyr@illinois.edu, and our lab site is hfaging.org. So please visit and send questions. And I think I have the opportunity to maybe answer questions here. Is that right? I tried to save some time so we could have some discussion.
Sorry. Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I have 15 minutes for Q&A. I'll keep my eye on the Q&A and chat.
And by the way, that's Paro, a robot behind me. That is a social robot. He's hanging out with me today.
Sounds good. So, Dean, if you don't mind keeping your eye on the hand raising, and I'll keep my eye out on the chat and Q&A. If anyone has questions, you can type them out or raise your hand and you'll be invited up to the stage to ask your question.
So I do see a question about the eye gaze for control and eye contact with the robot. Where do people look when interacting with the robot versus trying to control the robot? It's a great question. So they're looking at the screen where the interface is, and they have to hold their gaze at a particular location when they want to move the robot in a particular direction. But one of the things you might have seen in the video with Henry was he was having to go back and forth. I'm looking at where the robot is, I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking at where the robot is, I'm looking at the screen. That's one of the complexities. Henry does have limited movement of one thumb, and he's able to use a joystick. And so we are exploring if we can make the interface easier for him to control. you would be able to just be watching the robot while you were controlling the joystick. The other avenue of exploration is to save certain activities. So I might say, I want the robot to move closer to the bed. I don't have to guide it. It can remember that path, and I could just rest my gaze on come to the bed, and that would be remembered, and it would happen without me having to control it so carefully. Great question. Thank you. How soon do you think it will be before these devices are commercialized? You know, you can buy a stretch robot right now. So it is commercially available, but it's really still, I mean, it's available for anybody to buy, but it's still a research robot. So as I mentioned, there's still a lot to be learned as we're moving forward. But I envision within the next few years, having these robots in the home. I mean, Henry has one in his home and is using it. So it's very close, I think, for certain kinds of activities and certain kinds of users. When they'll be available for everybody broadly, I don't know. But I also think in places where multiple people live, so in assisted living communities, for example, they're likely to adopt robots more quickly because it's more cost effective. You could have one robot helping multiple people. It's really on the horizon. I don't want to make a prediction, but it's coming more quickly than we might think. Ooh, now they're coming fast and furious. Okay. How did you decide how the robot would look? That's a good question. I was not engaged in that decision, but it's meant to look very slim and not too imposing and functional. So it doesn't have a face. It doesn't have a personality. That's one of the things we're exploring, is maybe it should, right? But it doesn't right now. And I think the role of appearance is really important. We found in some of our other studies that what people want the robot to look like depends on what the robot does for them. And so robots like Stretch that are very functional and doing tasks, they wanted it to look more machine-like. But if it were a robot that were meant to be more social, I want it to be cute, like the Paro behind me, or to have more of a personality or a human look. That's a very wide open area of research, is the appearance of the robot that's going to be most acceptable to individuals for different activities. The size of the robot is a big issue. So that was one of the big challenges for the PR2, was it was so big. It was designed to fit everywhere that a wheelchair could fit, so it could go through doorways and everything, but it was big. And that was another consideration for the Stretch robot. It's relatively small. You can think about it like the size of a vacuum cleaner. It's in a closet. We keep it in a closet at the Life Home. We take, it comes out when it's needed. So it's a lot smaller and less likely to get in the way. But that is also something that we need to think about. Depth sensors to record and measure the movement and behaviors of the end users. I confess I am not the engineer on the team. I don't know what kinds of sensors are being used, but I encourage you to go to the Hello Robot website because I think they provide more detail about how it works. The idea of using voice command, such as the Amazon Echo, is definitely something we're going to be exploring. A lot of older adults and users in general think it's a lot easier to just tell the robot what I want it to do. But sometimes it takes a lot of precision. So I'm in a very busy office right now with all kinds of stuff, and I want that one thing over there. I'd have to describe it in great detail. My colleague Charlie Kemp has shown that if I could just use a pointer and point at what I wanted, that's actually much faster. So we're looking at different ways of communicating. People think voice because that's what they're familiar with, and the Echo products are a great avenue to explore, but we shouldn't be limited by that. In the Enhance Center, could you talk more about what is being done to work with people with cognitive disabilities? Yes, so we have the way these NIDLR centers are set up, it's a rehab engineering research center. You have to have research projects and development projects. So we have a needs assessment project that I'm lead on. We have another research project that Sarah Saja is lead on that is designing a technology tool to support activities in the home environment. A third project is a development project looking at enabling people with cognitive impairments to use transportation software. So like Google Maps. Google Maps could be so helpful if somebody is having difficulty with navigation and wayfinding and cognitive issues, but they're difficult to use. So developing instructional support and training for wayfinding apps. And then the fourth project is looking at support for prospective memory in the home environment. So Jeff, I encourage you to go to the Enhance website, and there's a little bit more description about the different projects, but there's quite a range of things we're focused on. Let's see, were there any technical issues that could cause frustrations when using the robot? That's a great question. Yes, and I think that's why you engage someone like Henry and Jane. They understand how robots work. They would, we had some technology failures and things that we had to adjust. Rather than get frustrated, they were helping us to try to figure out how to use it. But if you're trying to move towards commercialization and putting it in people's homes, you absolutely need to minimize those types of frustrations. Those are the kinds of things we're trying to solve in the life home before we put it out into people's homes. Excellent point. Let's see, there were a couple about the voice commands. I think I got at that. What do I think needs to be done to get the price down? One of the things we've been trying to think about is, instead of having one robot that does everything, to have specialty robots. So the analogy is, in your home, you have an appliance that washes your clothes and a different one that washes your dishes and a different one for the vacuum. That reduces their cost. You're not trying to have one device that does everything. Same thing with the robots. And so by thinking about what in business I've learned they call the minimum viable product, what does it need to be able to do at the bare minimum to be useful? That helps bring the cost down. And I think those are some of the things that we're focusing on. Did we use any specific methods to investigate satisfaction? Yes, absolutely. So we use standard technology acceptance model components from Davis's work in the late 80s. So perceived ease of use, perceived usefulness, perceived enjoyment. We've also in some studies used the NASA TLX, which is a subjective workload, which gets at frustration, which was one of the previous questions. How difficult is it? Is it frustrating? How much cognitive effort is required, physical effort, and so on. So we try to use tools that are off the shelf, so to speak, that have been used for a long time in the field of human factors and in technology development. We add our own as well. We've developed a few measures. I have a technical report that describes them all. We have a robot opinions questionnaire, robot preference questionnaire, and a robot experience questionnaire that we've developed ourselves. Oh, trust with the robot. Great question. Again, same thing. There are some standardized trust measures that are used. But one of the things we did in one of my students' master's theses, we did a qualitative evaluation about the PR2 and the what led to people to trust in a robot. And it was very interesting because it was an in-depth qualitative evaluation of what kind of characteristics do they want their robot to have if it's providing them with care. And they want it to look a certain way. They want it to feel a certain way. They don't want it to be hard or difficult if it's interacting with them. They have very clear opinions about what it would take to trust them. So you can use a trust questionnaire, but I also found the qualitative interview questions to probe a little bit more about the trust opinions to be very, very informative. And again, happy to share any of these things that we're talking about with people. Let's see, frustrations, satisfaction. Okay, there are a lot of groups and organizations working on this. Do these moguls support your work? Facebook, Tesla, etc. Not yet. Most of our research is funded by federal agencies, so U.S. federal agencies. We would love to partner. It's difficult to partner with the large companies because rightly so, they want to own what they're developing. And the way that a lot of the robotics community is set up, everything is open source. So it's a very different model. So it's a little more difficult to partner with the larger companies. We look for opportunities where we can, but we're not really actively doing that just yet. Okay, 3 minutes left. I think we got most of them. Feel free to email me again. It's wendyr@illinois.edu. Thank you so much for your engagement and wonderful questions. I really enjoyed this opportunity to meet everybody virtually. Have you worked with diverse backgrounds to help design friendly robots, such as animators, theater folks, and character designers? That's a great question because that's their expertise. Exactly. We do have somebody on our team who's an industrial designer, and we just had a faculty member move from Disney to the University of Illinois, and that's what he was working on was animatronics. And there's another company that's designing another pet, like the Paro is a baby seal. He's designing a dog, a robot dog, and he's working with the designers that developed the Muppets. So, I mean, I think that is the way we need to go. And it's a great example of broadening our thinking about interdisciplinary activities and including designers and they'll have ideas about the development and options that I can't even imagine. Good question. Thank you. Thank you, Dean, for putting my email in the chat. I started to do that, but I can't dual task. So there it is, wendyr@illinois.edu. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
So much again, and I hope people will reach out to you. Your talk was absolutely spectacular, and again, thank you so much for your time. I hope you'll stick around for the break and some of our other activities over the next 2 days. We going to jump into our research colloquium. So Barry, if you don't mind popping up on stage. We are ready for our research panel.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Innovative Solutions for Healthy Aging. I'm really pleased to be here. Absolutely appreciated the presentation that we just had from Wendy. It's fantastic work, and as an industrial designer, I'm quite keen on seeing some of the characterizations that Gina asked about. This morning we have our research colloquium, and just double checking the definition of colloquium. It's interesting because it does pertain to an academic conference or symposium, but it's also about an important and high-level discussion. And so this morning we are joined by two up-and-coming researchers that definitely hit that bar of being able to hit the important high-level aspects on research to support innovative solutions for healthy aging. So please join me in welcoming Justin Bears. Did I pronounce that right, Justin?
Yep.
And Alex Campello. Is that correct, Alex?
Campello, yeah.
And so we are, let me see. Justin is a human factors engineer. He is, let me just see, joining us and involved with the University of Calgary. And so, Justin, perhaps I'll invite you to expand on that introduction and give us a bit of insight into your research.
Yeah. As Barry said, I'm a human factors engineer. I just completed my doctoral work this summer at the University of Calgary which was all focused around designing and developing and evaluating an app for helping patients with non-valvular atrial fibrillation choose stroke prevention therapy. So it's kind of where my work centers around, is healthcare human factors, and a lot of it deals with healthy aging. So it's a right fit for this symposium.
Okay. And Alex, you are also at the University of Calgary, just finishing up, I believe, your PhD. Sorry, just checking my notes here. You're a physical therapist, PhD candidate, and you're interested in advancing and promoting physical literacy. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that and how your interests pertain to healthy aging.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Barry, for the introduction. So yeah, I'm a physiotherapist, and I actually already finished my PhD work last year. And my work was using the background of physical literacy to promote physical activity using virtual reality. Mainly, my PhD work was methods, understanding the quantitative and qualitative part of the research. So using basically an exercise program for 6 weeks, using the Nintendo Wii with a group of seniors. So we want to understand how they manage to work in virtual reality using the background of physical literacy. So how they were motivated, how confident they were, how physical competence they were, the virtual reality, and how they interact with each other. So the social part of which we also research.
Okay, excellent. And so my understanding is you both have presentations. Who would like to go first? Alex, shall I invite you?
Sure, yeah, I can go first. Gonna share my screen here, just a second. Let me see.
There should be a share button down at the bottom. There we go.
Oh, it's already, oh, thank you there. Okay, so I'm gonna try to stick to my 10 minutes presentation. So again, I'm gonna talk about my PhD. The title of my presentation is Promoting Physical Literacy to Older Adults Through Active Video Games. And again, my name is Alex Campello. I finished my PhD area of innovation in pedagogy and sports performance under Dr. Larry Cate's supervision in the University of Calgary, here in the Sports Technology Research Lab. We know my presentation is going to be very close to Dr. Rogers, which I thought was fascinating talk. But again, we know the world population is aging, and by 20 it's expected to double the number of seniors people up to 2 billion seniors. So it's going much faster than it's, but as I said, let's try to link this quantitative part of understanding healthy aging. We know that there is a prevalence of multimorbidity over 60% among aging 65 to 74, and even more if we analyze the older than 74 years old. And see a predominancy of sedentary lifestyle. So about 30% of the older population report in physical activity. So what kind of barriers you can find when it comes up to practice physical activity? So I came up with a behavioral, cognitive, affective, and physical barriers for not engaging in physical activity. So behavior would be like lack of time. That might be just like an excuse because the time for physical activity. In terms of cognitive, seniors don't really know the benefits of practicing physical activity. In terms of affective domain of, so they can sometimes present fear of injuries and lack of motivation and confidence. And in terms of physical barrier, can present some physical impairments and also multiple chronic. So the physical literacy is a theory that recently is being more accepted by healthcare providers. According to the International Physical Literacy Association, the definition of physical literacy is the motivation, confidence, and understanding to value and engage in physical activity for life. So if you check the 4 domains of physical literacy, it's very linked to the barriers practicing physical activity. So if you understand how people are engaging in physical activity under these 4 domains, maybe I can correct it better and make people more engaged and benefit from what the physical activity can. So, and also, how can we use the technology to support the practice of physical activity for older adults? There is a lot of wearable technology nowadays. So trackers, just a wristband that kind of capture your movements during the day or even how you're sleeping during the night. And also we can use the virtual reality such as the active video games like the Nintendo Wii, the camera, the Kinect camera, for example, or even the goggle, right? The 3D, immersive 3D virtual reality. So coming up with physical exercise programs, challenges provided by technologies, maybe you can increase engagement, prevent delay the risk of illness, and also improve overall health status. So, as Dr. Rogers said, maybe we have to analyze in a socio-ecological model how is the person or how is the individuals that are in this physical exercise program using technology. And so understanding the factors, the structural factors. So if we understand in a macro level, if the government, for example, is providing some physical exercise programs for the population, and how is this accepted in terms of social cultural context? How are the policies? Is there like some guidelines to practice physical activity? So then a first evaluation of the individuals and the structural part of it is needed to build strategies to attack what is needed for this group of people or just one individual. And what type of technology you're going to use? Is just a commercial or is it customized ones? What type of a location these seniors are located? So it's a community center, it's an independent living facility, or nursing home. And then the outcomes that we got using specific strategies or using specific technologies, they increase their motivation, their confidence, or physical competence. So reevaluating all these outcomes and bringing up maybe new ideas or new people using like a multidisciplinary people, right? Like a group of people to work with these seniors would be great, and then try to go through this cycle again. So this is how we understand, and we try to test this. So we came up with a quantitative approach on RCT, so a randomized control trial. Selected 40 seniors to participate in our research. We look at the functional mobility, the motivation, the confidence. They are using the Fitbit to check the daily step count, and also how they understand, how they know about the benefits of So we separate them, randomized into training, the conventional training without any technology, just the wristband, and also no training. So they were asked to just to continue their own activities during the day. So there's two pictures. We tried to match the activities they were doing in virtual reality and without the virtual reality. Here on the top is the exergaming training, and the bottom the conventional. Here's some demographics of our population. What is in BMI? So the exergaming group, they presented a higher BMI than the others and could somehow influence. There was no statistical difference in terms of daily step count, confidence, and knowledge and understanding scales between the groups. However, we could see improvement on functional mobility. So in the group that used the reality for exercising, so we saw that they reduced the time of walking. So that was the time up and go test. So they had to, and they reduced the time also of walk, so they did faster compared to the other groups. And also they increased their extrinsic motivation. So the extrinsic motivation would be something external to kind of a reward of why we're doing this physical activity. So, as I want to socialize, or I'm going there because I want to get healthier or more active. So this kind of a motivation increase in the exergaming group. In terms of qualitative approach, we want to understand how was the perceptions of the participants while using the technology for exercise. So it is an interpretive and thematic analysis. Here's some of the themes that we found for each group and separated in terms of physical literacy domains. I'm gonna go through in some of the. So we saw a lot of positive perceptions. So willing to try the new technology, the enjoyment of the activity, better sense of humor and sense of commitment. The awareness about the physical activity, so they know that they were using like the wristband, and they want to know how active I was during this study. For you could socialize with people and kind of compete while gaming, while playing the same games, and they also kind of help each other while playing the same game. They kind of figure out how they could transfer the physical activities that they were doing in the game to the real life, and they could also perceive that it could be used for rehabilitation purpose. Some of the negative perceptions was kind of some of frustrations with the equipment. For example, if the battery was low, the system wasn't, and they kind of got frustrated. In the beginning, they were not familiar with the technology, so they had to learn, and this is kind of a learning curve and in the beginning, but then in the end they were very familiar already with the equipment, and also the cost to purchase the equipment, right? It could be a negative perception. There were some limitations.
One moment, please, Alex. We will need to wrap up pretty quick here.
Sure, yeah, I'm concluding already. So just to wrap up, we saw that the older adults improved and maintained their functional mobility and extrinsic motivation. The positive perceptions kind of outweighed perceptions. And if we emphasize the benefits of using the technology and mitigating the negative experience, maybe you can have a better physical literacy journey and improve our physical benefit from these activities and have a longevity for and a better, right? So thank you very much for your attention. I'm open for questions here. My email, if you want to send questions as well, I'm open to talk to you. Very much.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks very much. I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to Justin right now and have his presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions for both of you. Justin, are you ready to go? All right. Please share with us.
All right. So thanks for inviting me to today's, session. I'm just here to talk about my doctoral work that I just completed this year, which involved the design and development and the usability, evaluation, and pilot testing of a patient decision aid or app for individuals with non-valvular atrial fibrillation who are considering stroke prevention therapy and AFib management. In terms of today's presentation, I plan to cover the following. A brief introduction objective, just outlining what AFib is, a timeline of my research and the evolution of this app that I've been working on. I'll then share 3 points from each of the 3 phases of my work. Phase 1 was the design phase, phase 2 was the usability evaluation phase, and phase 3 was the pilot testing phase. So I'll share 3 points from those phases, and then I'll wrap it up with some conclusions. Now, as I go through today's presentation, there'll be several images from the Rapid AFib Decision Aid on your screen. For example, this image that you're seeing on the screen now is of the Decision Aid's welcome page. These images will correspond to the different phases of development while also representing the experience of a user progressing through the decision aid in real life. Now, as to what non-valvular chronic afibrillation is, or AFib. AFib is the most commonly treated cardiac arrhythmia. It is caused by electrical signal disturbances in the heart's atria. It affects approximately 350,000 Canadians. Its prevalence is expected to double by 2050, and the prevalence of, or the risk of AFib also increases with aging. So that's why it's very prevalent amongst older population. Also, it is associated with a 5-fold increase in the risk of stroke. It accounts for 15 to 20% of strokes suffered annually by Canadians. This risk, however, can be reduced by 2/3 with stroke prevention therapies. However, due to the numerous therapeutic options available to patients, deciding which therapy is best for them is often difficult and complex. That's why it's my ultimate goal to build a web-based patient decision aid or web-based app that was up to date with the current Canadian Cardiovascular and Canadian Heart Rhythm Society's comprehensive guidelines for the management of AFib, presented patients with all contemporary non-surgical therapeutic options to prevent stroke in the setting of AFib, and served as a means for communicating evidence-based information to help individuals with AFib weigh the pros and cons of stroke prevention therapy options, as well as to assess the benefits and risks according to their values and preferences. Now, in a timeline of my work, this research was conducted over 5 years and was conducted in 3 phases. Phase 1, the design phase, involved a systematic review of existing patient decision aids for the choice of stroke prevention therapy and AFib management, as well as the design process, and this phase culminated in the creation of the first wireframe prototype. Phase 2 is the usability evaluation phase, which involved a heuristic evaluation and end users usability testing with actual patients with AFib. During this phase, the wireframe prototype was revised after the heuristic evaluation and officially developed up to the end users usability testing. And lastly, phase 3, the pilot testing phase, this involved pilot testing the decision aid, again with patients with AFib. Okay, so now as for 3 findings from the design phase, phase 1. First and foremost, 8 design goals were key to the decision aid's successful design. These goals included building upon the findings of the systematic review that was conducted in 2015 and then updated in 2020. Personalized risk information according to self-reported risk factors, provide basis for preference construction, ensure that the decision aid could be used independently by patients before their clinic visit, design the decision aid to be easy to use and understood, to use a responsive mobile-first design, and to align contact with relevant clinical practice guidelines, and to gain approval of the decision aid from heart rhythm experts in AFib management. Second, so the adaptation of Elwin et al.'s two-stage process map for the development of web-based decision support interventions was key to the decision aids information in architecture and design. Like Elwin's process map, the first stage of my design process consisted of a content specification stage. However, in addition to performing a needs assessment of patients with AFib, an environmental scan of the contemporary clinical practice guidelines for AFib, and a systematic review of existing patient decision aids, I also included semi-structured idea generating workshops, the direct observations of patient consultations, and the creation of a user flow diagram. Together, this stage established the foundation and determined the high-level structure and flow of the decision aid. Sorry. And the second stage of my design process was the creative design stage. So this involved the storyboard and wireframe prototyping of the decision aid. This stage helped transform materials from stage one into text, images, and interactive elements that were accessible, attractive, and conveyed the decisions that needed to be considered. And for the last point of the design phase, I just wanted to talk about the use of low fidelity prototyping during the design process because it provided great flexibility. This flexibility enabled the visual thinking and creative design process of the decision aids development because it created a quick and easy way to translate high-level design concepts into tangible and testable visual representations of the decision aid. For example, the flexibility of these prototypes allowed me to focus on the decision aid's design, such as the orientation and spacing between the health risk factor questions as depicted by the red rectangles on the screen, and improve its design for the final product. Also, this flexibility made cooperation far easier because this decision aid was such a huge collaborative effort. Now for the second phase, the usability evaluation. First, I'd like to highlight the use of formative usability testing because previous decision aids for AFib that were developed without sufficient scientific effort devoted to their development. This testing was conducted to determine if the primary design elements were working, to identify any usability issues, and then also to provide solutions to those identified usability issues. Now, this was a major strength of this decision aid's design and development. Why? Because it was performed early at every stage of the development process as opposed to after development. And it was conducted in a two-stage mixed method approach. First stage being heuristic evaluation with usability experts, so experts in the field of human factors, human-computer, HCI, human-computer interaction, user experience, and then the second stage being end-user usability testing with actual individuals with AFib. For the next 2 points, I'd like to share examples of the identified usability issues and their solutions from the decision aid stroke risk screen. Usability issues identified included CHADS-VASC being an uncommon term. The definition of CHADS-VASC broke up the flow of risk information. Risk score and severity were only discussed in text and not included in any sort of visualization. The visualization that was included for stroke risk was misleading and not easily interpretable. And the all-important treatment recommendation was too far down the screen and lost amongst the text.
About 1 minute, Justin.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so once these usability issues were identified, they were analyzed 3 ways. First, they were identified into broad themes, and then they were also analyzed with respect to Nielsen's 10 usability heuristics, and then they were characterized according to source events. So this analysis was then used to assign a severity rating to these issues based on frequency, impact, and persistence. And then these ratings were used to prioritize changes that needed to be made. For example, the decision aids visualizations were given top priority because they had the most source events. And now, I guess, since I only have a minute left, I'll talk about solutions to these usability issues. To resolve these identified usability issues, information of the content was limited to 1 topic per screen. This broke down the original screen's information into individual bite-sized pieces. For example, the first screen detailed the user's risk score and severity and included a visualization of this information. The second screen detailed the user's stroke risk. Risk was framed in both the positive and the negative, and the visualization was changed to an icon array of 100 faces to create a familiar reference point for the user. And lastly, a screen was created for the treatment recommendation itself, and shading was used for emphasis. Is my time up? Barry?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Continue I think we've got another minute, so please go ahead.
Okay, so lastly, I just want to talk about some points from the pilot testing phase, the last phase. This phase was unfortunately cut short due to COVID. However, the information that we gained from it was great. Feedback was mostly positive. Users found our app to be easy to use, clear, and it met their user requirements. However, it's important to note that one participant, the oldest participant at 70 years of age, did require some coaching and stated that the decision aid took too long to finish despite completing it in 8 minutes. So it might be that there's some technological comfort that could have compromised the experience of this decision aid, but it also indicates that more testing with older patients is needed, as well as there might be the need for on-site coaching or staff just to help assist some users through the experience with this app. Feedback from healthcare providers was also positive. I guess leave it at that. And lastly, we wanted to collect information on the summary report, which is a succinct document that details the user's answers, which can be printed and saved at the end of a person's user experience. And then they can use that as a guide for discussing their preferences and values to their healthcare providers. And feedback was positive, with over half of the healthcare providers indicating that it was either extremely useful or very useful. And one provider commented that they really like this. This is the best part of the decision aid for them.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sorry for going over.
No worries. We've got time perhaps for one question for each of Alex and Justin. If someone raises their hand, Dean, can you bring them up on stage, please? Or can you please post your questions in the Q&A? Certainly really compelling research, gentlemen, in trying to mesh technological interventions that really support healthcare and activity. So I welcome both your research and your presentation today. Waiting for some questions. I'll begin with one for Alex. How did you find that the introduction of the technology was a significant threshold with your study group?
Yes, for sure. So they were not familiar with the technology that we were using, was Nintendo Wii. So in the beginning, we had to go through all the games that we were using for the sessions and teach them how to use the remote, how to use the platform that they own to balance themselves. So we demonstrated first how to do it, and then we were their sides to prevent some kind of injuries if it was. So we were there just to support them and answer their questions and help them to use the equipment. But by the second or third sessions, they were already doing by themselves, and they started helping each other as well. So this interaction was like very nice to see how they help each other and they engage right in the activities.
Oh, brilliant. So it was something that actually happened prior to COVID, or it was in
2018.
Excellent.
6 weeks of exercise program, and we did a follow-up evaluation after. So yeah, we were able to be with them like more closely without some restrictions of COVID now, right?
Oh, thank you, Alex. And Justin, we have a question for you. What types of people helped with creating the tool? You did mention, I think it was a bit of a team effort, so if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so a steering committee, which is essentially my supervisory committee. So we had I have two supervisors. One is a human factors specialist and one is a cardiologist. So they were on the panel. We also had another human factor specialist who's also a clinician. We had a decision scientist. And then we also contracted a design firm in Winnipeg to help with some of the actual app development. So it was a big collaborative effort.
Oh, cool. I thought there was a kind of a polished design touch to it. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, also on the steering committee was also an AFib patient. So we had clinicians, we had patients, we had design scientists, human factors, just kind of tried to make it as well-rounded as possible.
Yeah, to bring a kind of holistic approach to investigating the topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I also really appreciated the sort of the two-step approach, talking to using the heuristic evaluation up front with experts in the field before actually then going to end users. Did that help to target your inquiries with end users after?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it really helped streamline the process and kind of figure out, okay, these are areas that we really need to prioritize, and it really helped. Yeah, like I said, it really streamlined the whole thing.
All right, we've got one question in the chat. I am curious about the coaching experiences both Alex and Justin had with elder patients. Have you considered designing with dyads of users, e.g. user and assistant who is more tech literate? If both of you could perhaps comment on that. And Justin, we were just speaking with you, so perhaps you could weigh in first.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of experience with that. It was just for me, it was just one patient that involved it, but it was definitely something that we needed to, or we are considering moving forward with, and had conversations with, because where this app will be used is at the University of Calgary AFib clinic. And all the staff that we worked with and that evaluated were more than happy saying like, oh, if we're in the waiting room and have the time, we can sit down and do it with them, because we try to design it as simple as possible, less than 10 minutes, so it won't take up much time. And we also try to design it in a sense that we also know that a lot of these patients from their needs assessment, they do this at home with their partner. So we also had that type of consideration too, is try to design it so that, say, a spouse or a child, they could help them through, not child, but their children could help them through the experience. So it definitely was on our mind.
Excellent. And Alex, if you could weigh in, please.
Yeah. So while Justin was answering, I was just thinking about the oldest person that we had in the group. She was 95.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, so we kind of tried to be more careful of her because she was moving slower, and so we helped her to step on the platform, for example. And so example, we know that seniors are different in general, right? So it's very heterogeneous population, and so we have to familiar they are first with the technology they're using, and then maybe consider go through step by step, like very detailing what they are doing, even to mitigate that bad experience that they could have with the. But like I said, we had like a young group of people working in the background, so helping them, and we could actually teach them how to proper do the physical activity that they're using, for example. Like I said, in the end, they already coaching each other, for example, and teaching and assisting each other. So I guess in our lab, we believe in this peer-to-peer learning. People can help each other while doing the activity and even evaluating each other if it's the case. So I believe that the more familiar we have with the new technologies, and I think is a developing process that the senior is going to be more familiar as well. Like even if it's a phone or is a remote control, or now with immersive virtual reality. So, but coaching is something that we have to pay attention, because, and for example, Nintendo Wii was built for children, right? So we have to kind of adapt commercialization devices also customized to their seniors' needs specifically, right? So this kind of adaptation we have to think about.
Thank you both, John. Really appreciated both your presentations. Excellent work. And I think with that, we are at the end of our time for the research colloquium. And so back to you, Alana.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you guys both so much. Your research is absolutely amazing. If it's okay, maybe you guys can put your emails in the chat in case anyone has further questions for you guys. We have a, well, I guess 8-minute break now. So whatever the 45 is in your respective time zones, Calgary will be 9:45. Sweden, you will be at 5:45. We'll just take a break right now and you'll come back at that 45 mark. Please go back into the regular room, go to tables, talk to whoever you would like. Grab a snack, take a bathroom break, whatever makes you happy, and we'll see you guys soon.